Our Around the World segment tonight, just 2 days until the opening ceremonies of the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. I'll be tuning in to watch a sport that nobody understands, but everybody is fascinated by: curling. However, as we look forward to the games, security officials are gearing up to protect athletes and spectators alike against possible terror attacks. The entire backdrop of the games is more ominous than usual this year, given the tensions on the Korean peninsula, compounded with several factors that make this Olympic Games different than years before. With me now from the Center for Security Policy, Kyle Shideler. Kyle, good to see you.
Liz, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, Kyle, there's been a lot of talk about the security surrounding this Olympics, clearly because of the North Korean threat, the tensions, Kim Jong-un's nuclear tests, his nuclear weapons, his back and forth with President Trump here. But I guess setting that aside for a second, because the United States State Department has said we wouldn't be sending our athletes if we didn't believe this to be safe from that. What makes this Olympic Games different security-wise from games in the past?
Well, I think there's a number of things, one of which you touched on, which was the North Korean angle, because North Korea is a state actor, which gives them some capabilities that non-state terrorist groups don't have. Another possible spoiler this year is Russia, because of the Russian doping scandal with the Olympics. So if you were looking at a cyber threat, for example, you may see some meddling there as well. So we have a very high-tech concern this year. Security officials are concerned both with cyber attacks, which I mentioned, but also with the use of drones. Of course, you had the Islamic State very successfully conduct an attack using drones on a Syrian airbase. Russian airbase. So this is a threat that is definitely concerning to security officials. The good news is that this is a threat that they've seen coming for some time. Even before the Islamic State attack on that airbase, everyone knew that the use of drones to deliver ordnance was going to be the threat of the future. So they've been preparing for this for some time. So that is one thing that makes me a little bit more comfortable.
Right, and the level of security surrounding these games is phenomenal. Let me share with you some of the numbers. So, by the way, the U.S. is a great part of the security for this Olympics, even though it's taking place in South Korea. The U.S. Diplomatic Security Service, they're sending over 200 security personnel, and that's compared to 240 athletes that the United States is sending. South Korea is prepared with 60,000 security forces, 50,000 of whom are actually military. Are they prepared? Do you feel confident that they could thwart any effort by a terrorist group like the Islamic State, who would either want to use a drone to drop a bomb or wage some sort of cyber attack to try to sabotage the credibility of the games?
Well, obviously there are always risks, and you're going to be as ready as you can be, but you can't necessarily foresee anything and everything. One concern that I would have would be if we go high-tech, the enemy will often go low. So I would be concerned about basic attacks like a stabbing attack or a vehicular attack. I mean, it's worth noting that a pro-North Korean protester slashed the ambassador of the United States' face with a razor a few years ago. So that's an example of a kind of low-scale attack which can still grab headlines, which is ultimately what you would want if your goal is to disrupt the games. And of course, there are also all manner of targets outside the Olympic complex itself. Let's remember that the North Koreans were placed on the terrorism list as state sponsors of terrorism because they downed KAL 858, which was a South Korean airliner from Baghdad to Seoul. So there's all number of targets around the world which will be heightened targets because of the ongoing Olympics.
Right, and then in regards to the North Koreans and the nuclear threat, what do you expect from Kim Jong-un? We just heard reports that he'll be sending his sister as part of the delegation to the games. Do you expect anything shady from him? Do you expect him to behave? What do you expect?
Well, the North Koreans don't do anything that's not shady, Liz. And we have to look at what they're doing in terms of the Olympics, playing games with the South Koreans over whether or not they're going to do a joint parade. They've been playing games regarding certain cultural performances, including trying to get the South Koreans to provide fuel for a ferry to bring over an orchestra, which would be a violation of U.S. sanctions, which is why they're playing that game. So we expect the North Koreans to play games. The good news is as long as they're playing diplomatic games, including, of course, sending the leader's sister, we don't expect that they're going to be engaging in violence. So that's a positive.
Right, and that's certainly the hope. All right, let's pivot here to the United States for just a minute. There have been reports today that President Trump has asked for a military parade to be prepared. He wants the Pentagon to put on this sort of parade of our power through the streets of Washington, D.C. This has been met with mixed reviews from both sides of the aisle, actually. The Democrats immediately are jumping to the fact they're accusing President Trump of being like Kim Jong-un, saying only a dictator throws military parades, accusing him of dodging the draft and then wanting to show his power with his parade. That's Democrats' response, perhaps a typical response from them. Republicans are saying, listen, we are proud of our military. We want to honor the men and women who serve and who sacrifice. We want to showcase our strength to the world because the reason to have a strong military is a deterrent. Yet some Republicans are concerned about the cost of such a parade. How do you react to this?
Well, I think for the Democrats, remembering that in 1991, of course, we held a military parade following the successful Gulf War, is pretty much an easy way to dismiss that complaint. The United States has held military parades before, and no doubt under President Trump we intend to hold them in the future when we feel we ought to. As to the question of expense, we had Secretary Mattis on the Hill really concerned about the level of funding for the Defense Department. So that is an issue, and of course, with current debates over continuing resolutions or a budget and how to fund the Defense Department, that's going to be an issue. But the reality is, in terms of great expenses for the Defense Department, parades are not high up there. It's also worth remembering that the Defense Department provides air flights of fighter jets and other presentations at football games and other events. So this is not anything new.
No, and it's also worth noting, I think, that while the Defense Department does need more money, their budgets have been cut. At the same time, millions of dollars to the Defense Department is not the same as millions of dollars to you and me, as difficult as that is to say. But you're absolutely right. Showmanship is part of their recruitment, and it is part of a deterrent strategy, and it is not the method of an authoritarian dictator, as liberals would have us believe. Kyle, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.